let's bring in Victoria Matiash of the Pucks in 7 podcast and ESPN. Victoria, let's play a game here. So I just fired Kyle Dubas and I hired Victoria Matiash today. What's your first move as the Leafs GM?
Wow. Diving right in.
I'm sorry. I know. I had to hit you with it.
Well, first of all, I don't think I'm not, I don't want Kyle Dubas to be fired. So I'm going to backtrack a little bit there, but just going back to Austin Matthews' conversation and what he was saying, it's all the right words. That's what you want to hear from your star player. That's what you want to hear from somebody who you would like to maybe be part of your future going forward, if an extension is to be signed this offseason and for many years to come. What is he supposed to say? He's standing in front of like rows and rows and rows of press corps in Toronto. Everybody's paying attention to this. Everybody has taken their lunchtime at work to listen to what he has to say. And what's he supposed to say? I hate it here. My bags are packed by the door. Please trade me this summer. Like, he can't say that. So what I would first do if I am Kyle Dubas, because I don't think Kyle Dubas shouldn't be fired, but should be re-signed for at least a shortish contract. If I am the GM, I'm having a conversation with the star center of my team. It not today, in a couple, 2-3 weeks from now, and I'm going to ask them heart to heart, bud, do you really want to stay here? Because if you don't, because you have to be all in, because this is just going to be more of the same. You have to be all in if we're going to cough up the big bucks with the extension after July 1st, or else it's not going to work. And then let's start to look at what we can do, Matthew Tkachuk-esque, by talking to other teams. And because who are you going to get back? Austin Matthews, centers like this player do not grow on trees. It's not like we trade Austin Matthews and we're just going to get somebody who's comparable back. Who? Connor McDavid? Like, who are these players? He scored 60 goals last year. Where are you going to find these players? It's the same conversation to have about Mitch Marner. These guys are elite. They are magical. You don't want draft picks back if you are in a win now mode, which they insist they are. You don't want prospects unless that prospect's name is Connor Bedard, and that's not happening. Like, you need to get a substantial haul back, and you need somebody who's going to plug in and fill a position that this very dominant center, who I think was also a little hurt, he alluded to it himself in the postseason, but is one of the top 10 players in the league.
So in terms of that core four, would you send out any of them?
No, and I know that's an extremely unpopular opinion in the Toronto marketplace, and that's not what Leafs want to hear, but it's going to be, I'm making the same argument once again. For what? I mean, if they're offered a great deal for William Nylander, who I will argue was the best of the four this postseason, and that's not in a unique opinion, that's pretty much the consensus. But who are you getting back for these they're special players? First of all, you can't move Tavares. I would consider moving Tavares, not with that contract and not how he's skating these days. It's just, you are stuck with this guy, so you have to make the most of it. And also, he is your captain, and I think there's something to be said about what he does bring to the room in terms of leadership and all the rest of it. I mean, it may be something was bugging him this postseason as well, because he wasn't moving, even at age, I think he's 32. He's not 100. He should be moving a little bit better than that. So maybe something was bothering him as well. I would consider moving John Tavares. John Tavares is not going anywhere. He doesn't have to go anywhere. He has a no movement clause. Also, the contract is pretty much immovable unless you're going to sweeten the pot with other things, which the Leafs are not in a position to do. Instead, you're going to look at some of the depth performers. You're going to try to re-sign Ryan O'Reilly. I'm a huge fan of his. I know he wasn't as visible in the postseason as you would have liked, but I still think he has that in him. There's some other pieces there as well. And then you're going to look at, and you're going to hope Matthew Nyes is going to be the top 6 winger everybody thinks he's going to be. You're going to hope that Nick Robertson can stay healthy for 2 bloody seconds, because he has the talent to be a difference maker. And you're going to tweak your top 6 defensive core. And that's it. You've got your 2 goaltenders, I think. Throw Matt Murray somehow on LTIR. You've got your other 2 guys who are now going to be inexpensive if you can re-sign Samsonov for a reasonable amount, which I think you can. And you move forward from there. This is a tweak. This is an issue of tweaking. They weren't blown out. They were one of the last 8 teams standing this postseason. They got over that huge hump that's all we've been able to talk about for 19 years. And they could have won a couple of those games against Florida. Sergei Bobrovsky stopped 50 of 52 shots in that last game, and a lot of them were high quality. So again, they ran into another hot goaltender. I know it's a boring storyline. It's what nobody wants to hear, but it's also the truth.
So Victoria, if we're just tweaking the Toronto Maple Leafs this offseason, are we making a tweak at head coach and potentially moving off of Sheldon Keefe?
Yes, we are. Yes, we are. And I think Justin Keefe, Justin Keefe. I think Sheldon Keefe, I guess who I have on my mind. I think Sheldon Keefe is a good hockey coach, and I think they're not listening to him anymore. So if you've lost it, you can't fire 24 skaters, right? And if they're not listening to him, the narrative, especially in the last series was Paul Maurice outcoached Sheldon Keefe. And I believe that's true. So if that is the case and you have the talent in place, and they were the better team. They didn't play better, but they were the better team. Then you have to bring somebody in that Matthews and Marner in particular are going to pay attention to and buy into. And I don't think that was 100% there. So he'll land somewhere else. So I don't feel super bad. But I think if you have to make some adjustment, I think that's the adjustment to be made.
You're very much a player-friendly GM, Victoria. They're going to love you. Or the loyalty. I love the loyalty. I'm not sure the fan base will be a big fan of that. So that's what you think they should do. What do you think they will do? There's a good chance the core four return. I mean, the cap obviously is a big issue as well after this coming season.
I don't want management, whether it's Dubas or it's Shanahan or somebody fresh, James, to come in and succumb to what I would call peer pressure from Leafs fandom, because everybody's calling for this now. And if they're going to make a decision to move somebody, and of the four of who they'll be able to move most easily, it would be Willie Nylander with the contract and the way he played recently, all the rest of it. I don't want them to make that move to shut everybody up. That's my only concern. If the trade makes perfect sense, and obviously they're going to listen and they're going to have conversations, but again, the trade has to make sense. Dubas's trade history is not super. I like his signings a lot more than I like the deals that he's made. Most of them, 90% of them have been nothing burgers, like, bit player for bit player. But in general, the Matt Murray one, yeah. And there's been a few other ones, but I did like the Ryan O'Reilly one. Historically, though, he hasn't been amazing in the trade department. So it has to make a lot of sense. And I just don't, it's got to be one of those cases again with Florida and Calgary, like last season, that you're getting something back that's substantial for such a substantial player you're moving. This is me avoiding answering the question, James. I think they will move. I think they will look into moving one of the core four. And if it doesn't make any sense, they're going to come back to us and they're going to tell everybody it didn't make any sense.
We're speaking to Victoria Matiash, co-host of the Pucks in 7 podcast. Quickly, who had a more disappointing season, the Edmonton Oilers or the Toronto Maple Leafs?
That's interesting because you could argue the Edmonton Oilers only because they made it to the conference final last year and they didn't make it to the conference final this year. So there is an argument to be made there. But but they also were smoked last year in the conference finals. So who had a more disappointing season? I think it's pretty much on par. I think there was the expectation that both of them would move on to the next round. I would maybe say Toronto just because Vegas is a more formidable opponent on paper than the Panthers were, or at least looked to be this season for most of the season going in. And I think they were underestimated and they're gelling at the right time and they're doing everything well, but they are winning ugly hockey games, which is what you need to do. They're forechecking, they're playing physical, they're a nuisance in their own zone. They've been doing everything right to win playoff games, but they are, I would say, on paper, the lesser team compared to Vegas. So maybe following that argument, I would say that the Edmonton Oilers had a less disappointing than the Toronto Maple Leafs.
Yeah, I think I have to agree with you. Victoria, we're running out of time, but thank you so much. You're fantastic as always. Go listen to the podcast, Pucks in 7 with Victoria Matiash and Ryan Payton. Thanks, Victoria.
Thanks for having me, guys.